All right, what's up, y'all? My name is B. Dougie, and I am super happy to be here in Miami. I'm actually from Tampa. I grew up there first 25 years of my life, and out in the Bay now, the other Bay. But today, I'm actually not talking about myself. I'm talking about visualizing open source data in React. So who's ready for this? All right, awesome, perfect. Yeah, it's going to be a ride. A lot of slides, and they'll give us 25 minutes. So here we go. So we're in Miami. Anybody know this guy? Howard? No, probably not. Anybody like born before the 80s? Yeah, shout it out. All right, here we go. Gen X. All right, I'm actually an elder millennial, so. But growing up in Tampa, we watched Miami football. Back in the 70s, University of Miami it was a private college. It wanted to be the the Stanford of the South is what they were trying to go for, and it was a doctor college. Had no sports, and they brought this guy, Howard, to do recruiting, but also coach the Miami football team. And we got booze already? Yeah, but their first championship was '83. And the way he did this, they had no recruiting, they had no scholarships, and what they did is they went to local neighborhoods around Miami. So if you've ever been outside Coral Gables, it's a little sketch, but that's where my people are. But that's where he recruited from. And he found folks you would be overlooked, because folks who couldn't make it to Oklahoma or Alabama were able to play in Miami. And since '83, they won 5 championships. So they had Michael Irvin, Warren Sapp, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, all played for Miami football. So I just want to bring that up because back when I was in Tampa as a young JavaScript engineer, I didn't know how GitHub worked. And the first thing I did when I had to solve a WebSocket issue was email the maintainer on GitHub. Because back in the day, we didn't know our emails were in the Git commits, and you could just email directly. And also, I had no idea how to use issues, so I just emailed directly. So I love this because the guy actually came back and he gave me everything I need to know about ES6, because at the time this was 2016, and also WebSockets. And the entire time he was in Thailand at a K-pop concert. But I bring this up because I didn't know how open source worked. I didn't know about anything. I just sort of just came up, learned some JavaScript, a little bit of Ruby, and some jQuery. I did some Ember back in the day as well. And this guy actually started my entire career in this ecosystem, and I super appreciate that. And I appreciate this too as well. Y'all know Gucci Mane? You guys up on it? All right. Gucci Mane, he's got this quote back in 2009, if you don't got sauced, then you lost. And it's literally about having the sauce. If you knew, we just saw vuejs, Chris, he was just talking about how he came up to this, he learned the sauce, and how he found to build projects and get stars and all that, etc. And the guy's just killing it. And I learned that from other folks that I reach out to. So shout out to Kenzie Dodds, guy answered my DM as well. Ryan Florence, I would not be doing React without Ryan Florence. He gave me a free ticket to learn React training. So shout out to that. But I love this quote so much that I actually named my company after this, which is Open Sauce. And I'm going to have a couple screenshots about open source as well. That's how I'm sort of presented the data. I already introduced myself, but if you wanted to find out more about me, oss.fy/bdougie. That's it. It's a real link. And I also want to mention, I spent almost 5 years working at GitHub. So I came up, I got the sauce, and then I started sharing the sauce with other people. So I led DevRel at GitHub for almost 5 years, pre-Microsoft acquisition, and it was a ride. But during that ride, I kept doing all this stuff in open source and hanging out with maintainers and finding out what was missing within the product. And so before I eventually quit in 2022, I reached out to this company, DigitalOcean, and was like, hey, y'all always be in my DMs asking for help for this large event that happens every year. What if we built something where you could see all spam in Hacktoberfest? And we built it in about 3 months. It's a Next.js app, and this is a visualization of all contributions happening in the 30 days prior. And this is a chart I'll talk about later. But it got me thinking, I'm actually not up on React all the time. I gotta go to these conferences to find out, or read blog posts from the screen up here to find out who's working in React. Because I know we've had a lot of changes. Some of the core team that came up 10 years ago, I guess we can say 10 years now, right? 10 years ago are no longer working on the core team. Some folks work at different companies, and the entire ecosystem's really shifting. We're seeing a maturity in the ecosystem a ton. And I found that you can Google who's on the core team. And in the docs, there's a list of the core team there. So who's active, who's on it. But I know Andrew Clark gets brought up a lot because he's got a lot of really cool prolific tweets. He's got great issues and RFCs. But like, what else is everyone working on? So if you didn't know this, on GitHub repos, there's an Insights tab. You click it, you can see, well, on the repo itself, you see contributors, but that's actually ordered by most commits. So it doesn't really tell you who's actually writing code now. But if you go to the Insights tab, you can actually see who's writing code recently. And you get this bar chart. I was going to say cool. It's actually not that cool because it's not that descriptive. You have to be a maintainer or org owner to see more data. But there's a way to actually click in and then highlight sections of the contributor graph to find out who's contributing in different times. So here I grabbed January to April to find out what's happening in React. I think there was like a tweet, someone was panicking about like last release was like so long, what's going on with React. But you can see all the sort of beta and the alpha, or the release candidates specifically on GitHub. But in my mind, it wasn't enough. Like my job was, I would meet with open source maintainers, all the ones you've heard of, every quarter at GitHub and find out, okay, what's missing. And overwhelmingly, this came up a ton. Like, hey, we would love to see what's going on in our projects. Like everyone's building their own solution. We're all lost in the sauce, and we love something. So what we did is we moved from Hacktoberfest to building something that's a little more custom. So folks who want specifically to see context on their projects, context on other projects, it gives you an opportunity to see what's happening. So this link right here, it takes you to a workspace I built. And this is a bunch of React meta frameworks, React projects, and it gives you like context on who's pushing things like server components. And that's actually a question I was asking earlier this week. It's like, I don't know who's doing that stuff. Like, I got a job and some kids. I don't want to be like digging in all these issues and trying to Google and stuff like that. So wouldn't it be cool if I could just ask who's working on server components? So this gives you a list here. And then what we have here is another thing that like came up a lot when I was at GitHub, which you can get this data through the API. You kind of have to know what you're doing. You can also get through like the search API, and there's a lot of like search view you can do with GitHub. But no one's going to remember that. Like we kind of want something like a better experience to see what's happening in our projects, but also what did I contribute? A lot of times I've talked to folks like Superbase, and they have a lot of open source contributors, but they don't have any context like what you've contributed lately, or how do we stay up until like, oh yeah, someone's like doing a great job, let's celebrate that. So going back to this chart, I like the name contributor distribution, and what this is like XY axis, and this is most recent on the left. Actually, that's right. Y'all, is that right or left? That's right. All right, here we go. On the right, that's today, and then on the left, that's obviously not today. So you can see there's a lot of distribution of projects, and then on the the y-axis, you got size of contribution. So these are all pull requests specifically. And I find this super helpful because you can see some known folks that you've seen before. And I've got a finance degree that I've never used before. Shout out to college. But I don't know anything about this. And if you take anything from this, I just want to let you know Nevo rocks, which is the name of the URL. Like this charting library, back in the day, like not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was using a bunch of D3 to try to build a bunch of dashboards. And Nevo's an open source project, and it gives you a lot of bells and whistles that you can just pass in your data directly, your JSON directly. And what you were just saying before was this, it's called the scatter plot. They have a bunch of components you can just like plug and play and then pipe in your data to. And it gives you a bunch of cool options to expand and add a bunch of labels. And I didn't know I wasn't up on the vibe check, but I was going to parlay not showing the code and just show you a blog post. So if you wanted to go through like how that works, code's open source, and read the blog posts. But there's some other things that we actually approach this to as well, because a lot of times you want to find out, okay, I can see who's contributing, but like what's the distribution of contributions? Because like folks who work on like react.dev versus the actual React core project or React Native, like what's that distribution of what it looks like? So I came up through the Webpack days, and they had like this tree map where you could see like actual like where your bundle was. So this is actually directly from Nevo. It's a component, and you can get a tree map of any sort of distribution data. So here is a bunch of different organizations, and then you have the repos and the breakdown of contributors. We have a storybook as well. If you look hard enough in our pull requests, you can find it. I don't think well, we have a link in our docs. Sorry, I should probably not speak so fast. But yeah, so we have this in docs, but I just wanted to show that, oh, did I skip past the video? Is that a video? Or, oh, yeah, it is a video. But here you can click through and see how we sort of step through and find out deeper into the nest, into the tree of how the distribution of contributions work. And I have like a screenshot as well on how that works as well, if that was confusing. But I find this super interesting because a lot of times in my role at GitHub, I'd go reach out to folks because we saw a couple projects like Vite came out when I was at GitHub, and to try to see distribution of what was happening in 2021, who was making contributions. Like if you go back to the Vite contributors in 2021, like they're all rock stars moving over. Like you do the same thing for React as well. I know there's a React conference. But the opportunity to know, okay, I would love opportunity to like make this work in my project. I would love opportunity to know who I should sponsor within GitHub. And a lot of the times you don't know how this is distributed. And I'm not, I think the whole sponsorship and donating money to open source is really broken because it's like, sorry, I don't know what the code of conduct is, but basically, like when you take donations and you pass on the offering plate, like it doesn't always trickle down to economics, if you know what I mean, what I'm getting. So what I'm getting at is like folks who just go overlooked because they don't stand on stage and they don't tweet enough. And like the opportunity here is how do you showcase folks who are up and coming and coming up in the game that should be highlighted, and that's a real goal. So this is like a distribution of the React core team as of today, and the work and commits in the last 90 days. So Epsilon has got 40% of all commits across the React repo. But you see Rick's also up there as number 2. And the biggest difference, like Epsilon has bigger PRs, has way more commits. Ricky has more PRs and less commits. Is that good or is that bad? I'll be honest, it really doesn't matter. But what I'm really trying to say is like seeing the distribution of like well, who's making commits, who's not making commits, like the deal is like, hey, it would be cool if we could just see who to recognize in the next release, in the next shout out, in the next blog post, in the next GitHub sponsorship. So that code I just showed is actually open source. That's our repo. That's actually the code itself. I imagine if y'all like doing code, you're gonna go into a GitHub repo and poke around. If you find any bugs, open an issue. But this is the actual React team tree map itself. So you can see Ricky's got a ton of contributions. Sebastian's got a ton of contributions. And what's really cool is like you can now see who's coming up in the React core team, who's making contributions for adjacent projects. So this is specifically the React project itself, but you can do this with almost any other repo that's public currently on GitHub. But I wanted to like, I knew what the previous speaker was going to be talking about, and I wanted to actually take a little sidestep into talk about the idea of stars. And like, as of today, React is the number 10 most starred project on GitHub, which I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what that means. Because at GitHub, we tried finding top 100 projects, and I think everyone has the top 100 project star list. But that's not really a good representation of who's involved in a project. Because some people are doing, like React's got a DevRel on the team. That's not a representation of Matt Carroll going out and speaking at events like this and like talking to users and customers. So like, how do you find out like what the best metric is? Mind you, 1 through 9 are all Markdown repos. So again, are we all Markdown devs at this point? That's why it doesn't matter. So stars are the best metric, and they don't actually convert into success as well. So picking on the last speaker as well, Excalidraw. What's interesting about this chart is like, and I was looking at this because I honestly, I forgot Chris even did Excalidraw. I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. He did that thing too as well. So I pulled up this chart and like, oh, this is interesting. Because like, yeah, these are stars on the top, but what's on the bottom is forks. And what's interesting about this, because everyone looks at stars first, but no one looks at forks. And there's like actually a strong correlation, like where you'll have like 0.0% of forks to stars. And the biggest like question right now is like, what happened on January 13th? Because there's a huge erection of stars right there. So anyway, what I'm getting at is, I think the first question we should ask Chris is like, what happened on January 13th? My guess is there was a release. There was not a release in a long time, so new features in the project. But yeah, tweet at me if I'm wrong. Yeah, so stars and correlate the forks, new contributors correlate the forks. What's actually interesting about this is when you look at new contributors, you can actually identify where interest comes from and where adoption comes from. So not everyone makes a contribution, but there's a lot of interest in issue comments. And like if there's somebody who can react to issue comments, that's actually a really good metric for success eventually, is identifying things like unique issue author accounts. So I will talk about more about that later off stage, but I actually put together another dashboard for every project that was in the OSS AI grant. So AI grant is, well, it sounds what it is. You get a grant from the former CEO of GitHub and his friends to do AI stuff. And I was actually curious of all open source projects in the AI grant and found a couple of them, but Rowie is one of them. Built in Next.js, they specifically take like a Google sheet and add AI to it. Like that's what we're doing these days. But what's interesting is like in the last 30 days, you got 11 PRs, and 11 open is green, merged is the next percentage, and then close is less than that. But that doesn't really give me a good idea of like a count. Like a number doesn't tell me anything. But what's interesting is I can now take that contributor circle and then identify, okay, who's doing all the work in that project. And what it is like the two co-founders of the project are the ones doing like 98% of all the work. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's just informational so that if I want to talk to Rowie about, hey, I'm stuck and I want to use this for work, I know exactly who to talk to. We've been playing around with some like dev stats, and this is statistics. So I did statistics in college. I got a C, but that doesn't matter because I learned about the rate of self-selection. So the rate of self-selection is like, in the context of open source, these are all contributions that happen outside the actual organization. So these are contributions coming from forks. So if you can take the rate of self-selection and say, oh, I think I'm gonna make a contribution to React. And if I see that that number is 0, then I'm like, oh, well, it turns out I might wanna do something adjacent to React because I probably need to get a job at a company sponsoring or supporting React contributions. I was gonna ask the poll I don't have like a little QR code, but can anybody think of like a successful open source project that has 0 outside contributions? Just yell it out. I didn't hear that. SQLite? Oh yeah, I didn't think about that one. It's called TypeScript. Yeah, and this is, to be fair, this is only in Q4 of last year. But in Q4 from what is Q4? September to December. Man, math is hard today. And I got a finance degree too. But 0 contributions outside. And that's interesting because, okay, I'm not gonna make a contribution to TypeScript tomorrow, but if I have something that's blocking me or something I wanna unblock, I gotta find somebody who can go advocate for me at Microsoft or advocate me. There's a lot of contributions from former Microsoft employees who have a strong connection. But what I'm getting at is, it's good to know what you're getting into before you go in. And shout out to Next.js. They're on the edge. So this is actually a representation of just random projects and commit velocity. This is a layer on top of Snowflake. The idea here is like seeing commits over time. And you can see VS Code, which is the #1 first-time contributor project by far, is VS Code. And the reason for that is like a lot of their extension code is actually directly in the monorepo. So that's why. But it's great for Microsoft. This is actually a chart of those same projects, but breaking out by events. And these here are 2 events from one project, which is Bun. And they had 2 large marketing events, basically. So one, they took funding. The other one was 1.0. And they were about a year apart. Again, this is just context. There's no like, there's not even a story there. This is like, hey, Bun's continue to move more work. If you really break it down, you can kind of see there's only about 2 or 3 folks doing the lion's share of all the work in Bun, which is interesting in itself. But if you're going to use Bun at work, probably go invest some time in conversation and contributions to Bun. So there's a couple other things that show up in our application, like engagement, PR commits plus issue comments. That's how we sort of identify engagement. I don't think stars should really be part of engagement, but they matter on earlier days in the project. The other thing, so taking that engagement ratio, you can take like Kubernetes, which has a strong governance infrastructure of how they operate in the project. You can see some other projects as well. So Tiger Beetle actually uses Zig. So it's not that Tiger Beetle is not high engagement, it's this niche project. So there's not as many in correlation of Zig engineers out there making contributions to Tiger Beetle and other projects. it's only going to get bigger from here for Zig, to be quite honest. Vue.js is another example I just put there as well, just for context and correlation. But I say all this because I started this conversation talking about University of Miami, and I wanted to talk about Tom Okino. And Tom probably would not like the fact that I put him on stage because Tom's normally behind the scenes. And back when I was coming up, I moved to San Francisco back in 2015. And that's exactly when the React core team, the original folks, started growing and building an entire team at Facebook. And it was actually a lot of work. There were some other folks on the team, but I'm going to point out Tom because he recently did an interview a year ago. And he was also highlighted in the react.js documentary. And what Tom did is he found folks who were overlooked, folks who were up and coming in the scene, who were building things like Webpack, and building things like Babel, and helping support the ecosystem through the Flux architecture, which eventually got the Redux folks on the core team. And I think that's something we don't get to see all the time unless you see an earlier project come to life. And as Laurie was saying in the previous talks, well, he was highlighted in the previous talk, there's nothing as different as React coming out now. And I think it's really because we don't have the folks doing the ground game and going to the different neighborhoods and asking folks, hey, you're doing a really cool thing. I would love to let me give you a platform. Let me invite you to come work at this company and build out the next level of this ecosystem. So a lot of successful open source that's happening in the last 10 years is really through company backing and large amounts of funding. So there's a ton of opportunity for us to see what the next thing is or continue to build on React. So I say this because there was a tweet I saw. So we shipped this thing, we started this last week. I actually had the entire team come before React Miami to come work on this thing called Star Search. And I grew up actually born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and there was this thing on TV called Star Search with Epic Man, and it was where you found the up and coming singers and Ryan Gosling, Beyonce, Justin Timberlake, all on Star Search. And I was thinking, what would be the Star Search for developers? Identify folks who are up and coming so that way we can invite them into the circle and give an opportunity to make contributions. So I saw this tweet from Adam, he was looking for specifically a Tailwind developer who has an interest in Rust. And we built a way to find that. So without further ado, I'm going to have to take off this. I'm going to move here. And I actually put a query here, and I'm going to be asking Tailwind developers that have a strong interest in Rust. And hopefully this works. Cool. Dependabot. All right, so if you guys know Dependabot, we would love for you to reach out to them and connect them with Tailwind. Now, but in all seriousness, obviously Dependabot does a bunch of contribution. It's a bot. But what we've done is we take the data that I've been showing you this entire time, we put it into LLM, and then we made it easier for you to query that data directly. So obviously there's some bugs that we're going to be clearing out of there. But yeah, I thought that would be a fun little gag as well. It keeps going. We'll just move on. Bots, am I right? All right. So I say all this and I'm winding down. I've been doing, for about 18 months now, I've been doing this podcast called The Secret Sauce. Before I left GitHub, I actually decided to buy cameras instead of paying myself a salary for the thing which is open source. And I wanted to find out with open source maintainers and open source founders and folks adjacent, what is the secret sauce in open source? What's success? Because I wanted to build something that wasn't going to be the next thing that to sort of grow a bunch of stars and build the same thing we see over and over again. I used to read this organization called the Black to Cats at GitHub, and we used to do hackathons at HBCUs. And the reason for that is that we did HBCUs, but also brought open source maintainers at Morehouse to teach college students how to do open source. And I think it's really about lending opportunity and influence and reputation at a time where folks don't really get a lot of that. And I was talking to Brendan Burns. He co-created Kubernetes. And early day Kubernetes, they were measuring not stars and nothing else, but issues. Issue authors, if anybody who makes an issue outside the organization, they were to go check and be like, oh, where's this person from? And what that turned into, and this whole conversation is there, you can go watch it later. They found Red Hat was like, hey, they keep opening issues and asking questions. Because it was at Google at the time, let's go ask questions. Red Hat, what are you trying to do? And Red Hat's sign-off of Kubernetes changed the entire industry and how we approach orchestration and at the time, containers. So I say that it's a React event, but like that correlation exists in React. There's so many other stories of how this happens by folks just paying attention outside, looking at the contributions coming outside. So there's some other things that we'll throw together. This is all available in the API right now. It'll be in the UI shortly. But things like confidence, what's the ability of like an individual who stars and forks a project? So these are stars and forks on the projects that I mentioned before. And you have the same two little cat ears. These are folks who can make a second-time contribution. I think we over-index on good first issues in this industry, and we really need to move into like what is actually consistent contributions. How do we encourage folks to continue to hang out with us and make contributions and grow an ecosystem community? So I leave you with this. I had this question like, who's working on React? It actually doesn't matter. It's like, the question is, what are you working on? So if you find me, I'd love to find out what you're working on. Tell me your cool projects, what interesting things you're doing in React, because that would be super helpful. If you're interested in like trying that same dashboard I showed you earlier, we have this URL called pizza.new. You will just be kicked into creating a workspace that will eventually look like this, where you could see all the data that you're looking for in the projects you care about. So whether you maintain a project or whether you're trying to make your first or second or fourth contribution, opportunities is there for you. I'm B. Dougie. That's what I look like on the internet. And if you don't got sauce, then you lost.